Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So, once again, I'm reading out the word of the Buddha, and for those of you who weren't here 2-3 weeks ago when I did the first part of the word of the Buddha, there's many chapters here. This translation is my own translation, and because I've been a monk for a long time and responsible for teaching other monks like Ajahn Brahm pali, that I'm very content with this translation. But it's not just a translation, and certainly not a word-for-word translation. It's a rendering of sentence by sentence, meaning by meaning. So in other words, that sometimes you may find some whole lines taken out because it's repetitive. And I know certainly for myself and for many others, the repetition kind of makes the understanding of these teachings a little bit harder. So I'm rendering them as one would present these teachings in today's world. But having just read out the first noble truth of dukkha, and then just got to the point of what we call the 5 components of existence, the khandhas. And the khandhas are not something which is specific to this components of existence. Even the robe which I have on is sewn into parts. And usually we either have to have 5 khandhas of the robe, 7 or 9, and these are just the sections of the robe. And you put them all together, sew them together, and that makes a Buddhist monk's robe. So khandhas are used in many different places, but here they're especially used for describing the components of existence. And because they are the components of existence, this is how the Buddha could see that this thing which we call the body and mind, that you can just describe it pretty well as these 5 khandhas, and nothing outside these 5 khandhas. So here we go. What are these 5 khandhas, otherwise known as the 5 components of existence? If anybody has listened to Vajrayana monks or Mahayana monks teach, we have the same teachings, but sometimes they use the Sanskrit instead of the Pali. Sanskrit is called skandha, here it's called khandha. And how in particular are the 5 components of existence suffering? First of all, what are those 5 components? They are as follows: the body, rupa, experience, vedana, perception, which is sanya, and other will, and other mental formations, sankhara, and consciousnesses, plural, vijnana. These are the 5 components of existence that are suffering, and that is called the noble truth of suffering. Now, the body, rupa, that's one word for this physical body. So that's the existence, the stuff which makes up our body. And instead of usually saying the translation of feelings for Vedana, feelings is a little bit confusing, because feelings can mean emotional feelings, you're glad or you're sad, and it can be all sorts of things. So I prefer the translation of experience. It's just what you can experience. So any one of the six senses. And perception, sanya, perception is a good translation of just this way we interpret the world. I say that because whatever you perceive, sometimes you can perceive something as delightful and somebody else can perceive exactly the same thing as repellent. One of the old similes, which apparently they use in psychology, is, you just put a number 6 in front of a person, but you hold it upside down. What number is this? It's 9. It's not 9, it's 6. I can see it's 6. No, it's 9. It's a very simple simile, but it depends upon your perspective of actually what you perceive. And the one which is most powerful and often misunderstood is the fourth khandha, which is called sankhara. And if you look at how the Buddha used that word, the main part of sankhara is called volition. To put the word volition into its usual form, because I don't see many people using the word volition in normal speech. They usually use the word will, W-I-L-L. So sankhara I have here translated as will and other mental formations, but mostly will. And lastly, the fifth khandha, the fifth component of existence, many people just call that consciousness, vijnana. And that particular khandha, the fifth khandha, if you call it consciousness, this is where many people get confused. It's much more accurate, meaningful, easy to understand if you call it consciousnesses, because there are 6 different types of consciousness. 6 different types. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and knowing or mind consciousness. And they're each one totally different. And knowing that they are different means that one can understand just how the Buddha taught. These are consciousnesses, 6 different types of consciousnesses, not just one. And that is just my translation. And I can defend that to the max if anyone wants to argue. That is called the noble truth of suffering, each one of these components of existence. And sometimes people say, well, why is it suffering? Because, these are just what a human being is. They're a body, experience. Is experience suffering? Perception, will, and consciousnesses. I'm not going to justify that yet. It'll be justified later on this afternoon. But that is what the Buddha said, the noble truth of suffering. Now, very often people talk about upadana khandha. Now, the word upadana, a very good translation of that is fuel. It's like an uptaking. What something needs to fuel it so it can exist. For example, a human being needs the food, not just the food though. It also needs experience, will, and consciousness. So, what is the fuel the same as these 5 components of existence, or is the fuel something apart from the 5 components of existence? You have to deal with this because sometimes people say, oh, there's khandhas, components of existence, and there's components of existence with fuel, as if these were 2 different types. Is that fuel the same as these 5 components of existence, or is the fuel something apart from the 5 components of existence? And the Buddha replied, that fuel is neither the same as the 5 components of existence, nor is the fuel separate from the 5 components of existence. It is the desire and wanting that is part of these 5 components of existence. That is the fuel that sustains them. In other words, within these 5 components of existence, the 5 khandhas, you have the desire and the wanting there, and that keeps them going. It's not the same, it's part of the 5 components of existence, not apart from them, but it's that part of the 5 components of existence which keeps this process going. A lot of time, you may have heard me say that this thing which we call life, me, whoever it is which bears your name, it is a process. It's not a thing. It keeps on changing, and sometimes totally changing. But it is that fuel, the wanting and desire, keeps this sequence of experience with consciousness and will and perception in the body as well. It keeps it going. When that will and wanting stops, then that process can stop. Now, more easy to understand, but very important. This is, from the Nyanatiloka Sutta. Any kind of body, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the body component of existence. All bodies, I can emphasize that word all, should be seen as they really are with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. Just a body. Not mine, not who I am, not a permanent essence. Now Vedana, any kind of experience whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the experience component of existence, Vedana. All experience should be seen as it really is, with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. Permanent essence there is my translation, of what many people take to be a soul, an essential being. And the Buddha argued in other places that if it is going to be called like a soul, an atta, it's assumed that that atta is permanent, is always there, this essential part of who you assume you are. And the other part of atta, as I've been mentioning in just ordinary talks in other places, the atta over in Sanskrit, is called the Atman. And it's very similar, please you can challenge me on this, it's very similar to the Greek word atom, which means indivisible. And there's something kind of similar there. In ancient times, before Rutherford split that atom and proved decisively it's not permanent, it's compounded by other things. In the same way, this thing we call an atta, a self, a soul, it's not a permanent thing, it's made up of other things. It's not the permanent essence of a being. So this is what it's saying here. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not a permanent essence. If you were serving Christian, you call it a soul. It's not a soul, but the word soul has just got too many cultural baggage surrounding it So I prefer the word a permanent essence, an essence of a being. Who are you? And that thing inside you, it sometimes can manifest in different ways, but there's something underneath all of that. Is that the permanent, like soul, a permanent essence? And the same with Vedana, your experience. Any kind of experience, Vedana, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is the experience component of existence. And all experience should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. You can't own it. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. Sometimes you think, I was not feeling myself today. And that's what a silly statement that is. Or sometimes we feel that, what is the true me? You're taking that sometimes to feel some beautiful existence, some beautiful feeling, which is there forever. So no, all experience also comes and goes. Any kind of perception whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is a perception component of existence. All perception should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. Which perception is correct and which correct perception is wrong? Those terms don't really apply, right or wrong. All of your perceptions, they're conditioned, caused by so many other phenomena which came in the past. Depending on, for example, the perception of beautiful Sri Lankan curry. Is that delicious? Ananda is shaking his head, yes. I would say, no, it spoils my tummy. But this is just our perceptions. Those perceptions are real, but they cannot be relied upon as being truth. So these are just perceptions. And can we have bare perception? Really true perception? The only bare perception which I've ever experienced is in Jhana Grove with those teddy bears we have down there. That's bare perception. Now the next one, the fourth, is sankhara. Any kind of will and other mental formations, but mostly will. Any kind of will, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is the will and the mental formations, component of existence. All will should be seen as they really are with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. So when you make a choice, do you ever assume it's your choice? It's mine? If not, then who made that will? This is where it gets fascinating, to see this in your own life. Why I do things which I do, why I tell bad jokes. And I know that very clearly. It's because my father told us bad jokes. Why do I teach meditation the way that I do? That's because Ajahn Chah taught me, encouraged me to do that. You can see where all this so-called will comes from. And I like that realization that the will is not me. It's not my will. I can say that it's my will, but that's, if you're being totally accurate, that's not true. This will is not who you are. I will just go on to the next one, consciousnesses, before I will sum this little section up. Any kind of consciousness, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own consciousness or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the consciousnesses component of existence. All consciousnesses should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not a permanent essence. What do you mean this is not my consciousness is? We may identify with them, but do you own them? If you own them, you should be able to control them. It's your property. If you own a house, it's in your name, can you control it? Your car, your hand, your glasses. But our consciousnesses, sometimes it would be wonderful to turn off your consciousness, say sight consciousness, when you're seeing something which is not pleasant for you, and just to keep the happy consciousnesses. But you can't control consciousness, you don't own them. Even conscious experience just comes and goes. It can't last. That's one of the important things you realize in deep meditation. Any one of those 6 consciousnesses, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and mind consciousness, when any one of those dominates and remains still, doesn't change, it disappears. I'm saying this, I've said it many times, but that experience which I had as a lay meditator, when I went to a Zen retreat, the only reason I went there was because there wasn't much choice. You go to any Buddhist place where they let you meditate, no matter what tradition. When I had my eyes closed, I could do whatever I wanted. And so this particular time, it was in a barn. It was a retreat with maybe 20 people or whatever, and we'd sit with our backs to the corridor and our heads facing the wall with no windows, and the wall was just whitewashed. It was an old barn in the north of England, and I hadn't any idea what I was supposed to do except sit up straight, keep your eyes open, and just be in this moment and just stare at this wall. And not knowing what I was supposed to be doing was very helpful. I had no expectations. And just having done other meditation practices before, at least I knew how to be in the present moment. I knew what it felt like and how not to describe things to myself. That's one of the reasons why it was a whitewashed wall, very simple. You can't really describe very much on a whitewashed wall. It was very, very simple. But then what happened after only 10 or 15 minutes? Looking at that whitewashed wall, the wall disappeared. My eyes were fully open. It was like you lost your ability to see for a few minutes. I was fortunate, and this is why I encourage each one of you about this. If this kind of thing happens, don't be afraid. This is where you learn so much about how your senses work, how they operate. You know, the sight turned on again afterwards, and you could see that wall as it was before. all that happened because nothing was happening. You were just staring at a wall and it wasn't important. Nothing was dangerous or exciting, it just vanished. That is like the screensavers which people have these days on computers. If you don't click any button, if there's nothing important, then the screen turns off. It goes blank. And that was what was happening with my sense of sight. And I realized from that experience that's exactly the same which happens when I start my meditation with my eyes closed. You realize that when you close your eyes, first of all you see the inside of your eyelids. But that doesn't change because it stays still, nothing important or exciting or stimulating. It turns off. So you can't feel or see anything. And I realized that that's an important part of the meditation. When your senses remain still, they disappear. They turn off. There's no sense activity there at all. And that's what was happening there. And so, here it says even consciousness, of sight consciousness, that can turn off. Sound consciousness, hearing, it can turn off. I'm not talking of when you go to sleep, I'm talking when you're fully awake. And you can hardly hear anything. A few days ago, because it was my 50th anniversary of being a monk, and somebody sent me an image. Actually, I got it wrong. I thought this was the image of the place where I was given ordination 50 years ago, called Wat Saket in Bangkok. But the actual real place where I was given that ordination, that was the main hall. No one used to use it in the morning time. So as a novice monk, had to become a novice monk at first, I used to go there after the chanting in the morning, and then I would do some walking meditation in that hall. No one else was using it. And so it was lovely carpeted. I think it did have an aircon, but it was so well insulated it didn't really need the aircon. And one thing which it did have, which I thought was a bit ridiculous, was a grandfather clock which chimed every quarter hour. And the meditation which I was doing, the walking meditation, I soon became very focused, very simple, and I started walking very slowly. Just naturally, not forced. And it would take me half an hour to move from one side of the hall, turn around and walk back again. That took a whole hour, half an hour each way. And I would get very quiet. I never realized how quiet I'd become until one day that I was walking after about 40 minutes, just with my eyes on the nice soft carpet in this main hall, my eyes just staring down, and just all my senses, being drawn inwards. And that's when I heard this sound. It was a strange sound, because it appeared to be such a long distance away. And I recognized the word was my monk's name, Brahmawangso. It was like somebody was calling me from a great distance. And it was so weird that I paid attention to it. And as soon as I paid attention to this very soft, distant sound, I realized there was a monk shouting in my ear hole. And the reason was that I had been meant to finish early that day to go to a ceremony and I'd forgotten all about it. And he'd been sent to come and get me. And even though he was shouting in my ear, I could hardly hear him. My sense of sound had almost turned off. And it took me a long time. It was like when you start a car in the old days. It takes a while to get up the gears, to warm everything up, so it gets to a usable state. And it took me about 2 or 3 minutes just to be able to turn my head and face him and ask him, "What?" Fortunately, this was a monk, so he knew what I was doing. If he did that over here in like Australia, in an office somewhere, they would actually ask the men to take you in an ambulance somewhere. But this was not being sick, this is the nature, when the mind becomes very peaceful. So this is where we can kind of understand what consciousness is and how it can turn off. It's not always there. So, any kind of consciousness whatsoever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is a consciousness's component of existence. And all consciousnesses should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, I don't own these things. They can turn off. This is not mine, this I am not. This can't be who you are, because if it was, you're turning yourself off, eliminating yourself. This is not a permanent essence, and that permanent essence can be seen very clearly in experiences such as that. These consciousnesses do not last. Sometimes they can totally disappear. Now you may agree with the first 5 consciousnesses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, physical touch. But the mind consciousness, how can you say that that's not yours? How can you say that this is not permanent? How can you know that for sure? And that is also why in the path of meditation that we shut down the first 5 consciousnesses, the consciousnesses of this sensory realm, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Those are the consciousnesses of what the Buddha called Dhammaloka, K-long-A-M-A, L-O-K-A. And when those disappear, it's not the end of the universe. There's 2 other worlds which are left, Rupaloka and Arupaloka. If you want to know what those are, the Rupaloka is the world which you experience as jhanas. And the Arupaloka is the immaterial states. And those are very different in the realm when there's 5 senses. Here is just a very still and blissful mind. That's Rupaloka. And Arupaloka, it's not even just bliss, but ideation. It's very hard to actually describe these things. But even more simple, more things are gone. So that becomes, one's knowledge of consciousness, understanding, 6 different types. Not me, not mine, not a self. Why did the Buddha describe it like this? And the best answer to that which I have come across is that these are the places where you try and make up a self. When a person says who they are, quite often they identify with one of these 5 things. You are the consciousness. You are the will. You are the experience or perception. Very rarely do people say they are the body. But a lot of times, if we've lived long enough in this body, we can identify with it. and we don't want to let it go when we pass away. So these are where we make the problem of thinking we are an identity. This is me. Seeing these 5 khandhas and seeing that, especially those last 2, the will and the knowing, I used to call them the last 2 citadels of the self, in the sense that in those old days, when a town was being attacked, then just the last 2 places where people would hold out, the central area where you make your last stand. These are like the places of the last stand of the sense of self, in the knowing and the doing. Okay? Can I pause there and ask any questions? Was I going on too long or just being boring? No? Okay.
Thank you, Ajahn. And
Yes?
I have, I agree that 6 consciousnesses, but came to my mind your book, Mindfulness, Bliss and Beyond.
Yes.
Your fruit salad simile, Ajahn.
Yes.
And in that simile, what you very nicely explain is that at any given time, you can have only one consciousness.
Yes.
So therefore, wouldn't the consciousness really relevant in this instance? And also, if so, if you use the 6 consciousnesses, the others also like Vedana, it's Chakku Sampassa Vedana or Sota Sampassa, there also you have the 6 experiences. So why, Ajahn, only for Vijnana that you choose the 6 consciousnesses? Thank you.
For
consciousness, why you use the plural?
The plural consciousnesses.
Yes, plural for when that simile explains, when you explain that very well, because at any given time, maybe only for a nanosecond or even, only one consciousness can stand.
Correct.
So therefore others are not dominant, others are
not there.
Not there. So therefore at any given time, present or past or future, I'm just, why only for consciousness, or only for Vijnana, you use the plural?
I use the plural there. I do that especially because many people feel that consciousness, the idea of consciousness, not very well defined, is just the essential part of who they are. Now, is he conscious? Is he alive? Is he aware? What's the difference between a human being and a piece of wood? You're conscious, a piece of wood is not. At least that's what we assume. No, it didn't say Al. Can't be conscious. And because of the way we look at consciousness in our culture, it's almost just the same as a sense of a sentience, a being. And the fruit salad simile, it's so hard to create similes for each one of these deep insights of the Buddha. The fruit salad simile is like you have the plate, and then suddenly on that plate an apple appears, and then the apple totally disappears and is replaced by a coconut. And then the coconut lasts for such a short time, and is replaced by another apple. And the apple totally disappears, and then there's a coconut. And the coconut disappears, and then there's a banana. And the banana disappears, and then there's a coconut again. And then the coconut disappears, and then there's a banana. And then there's a pineapple. Yeah, cauliflower. cauliflower eye. It's not a perfect simile. But each one of these, you notice that the fruit is always followed by a coconut, a mind. In other words, you see something and then you know you saw it. You hear something and then you know you heard it. You smell something and then you know you smelt it. And the same with all the other five, all the whole five sensory outside consciousnesses. And sometimes because the coconut follows, the mind follows with every other consciousness, that's where we miss the point and we think there's a continuity of experience. Sometimes we call it the continuity of consciousness. It's slightly different, but it flows. We can't see any difference, between sight. We know we're awake. I know I'm seeing you. You know you're hearing me. Isn't that knowing there? The coconut keeps on coming up and up and up and up. That gives an idea of continuity of conscious experience. And from that we build up this illusion of a self, a continuous soul. Even Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am. And that's totally deluded. Once you add the time sequence, I think, therefore I was. That's more accurate. You think, you remember you thought. And that memory gives you the illusion that you were. Am I making sense?
Yes, Ajahn, yes. And but at the same time, for the others also, say Vedana or...
Vedana experience, yeah.
There are six
different types of experience, and those experiences are different. Feeling in the body is not the same as seeing sort of through the eye. Indeed, you might call it like Vedana feelings. You could do that, but even just when I translated Vijnana as consciousnesses, made it plural, sometimes it takes a while for people to get familiar with a new way of describing things. So you're correct, you can say different types of sanya, different types of Vedana, but I did it with the consciousnesses because that is more sort of crucial to understanding there's nothing really here.
If I may ask another
yes.
question, Ajahn, that I think on MN 44 slide, paragraph, that is
that's my Vedana.
Desire, just above, that desire and wanting.
Oh yes.
That Chandaraga, because wanting is your translation for tanha.
Yes.
Raga, I have seen the word lust being used, desire and lust.
Indeed.
Does it make a subtle difference that one is more dominant or stronger and the other one is all-encompassing tanha?
I know that many translators, they don't want to use the same English term for two different Pali terms. And sometimes that they kind of invent or pull up another word, just to make sure that, when they say, like wanting, they say craving, and they say lust, and they sort of mention those words. But these words, the fuel which keeps those five khandha process going, is not strong. Even small amounts of chandaraga. And the word chanda, again, it's a lovely word because we use it in monastic Vinaya. If a monk cannot go to a meeting, they can give their chanda, which means their consent. It's a very light degree of wanting. I consent, please go ahead, whatever you decide, I'll agree to it because I can't be there that time. And so and if you give your chanda, you cannot sort of, oh, if I knew you were going to discuss that, I would not have given my sort of assent. We have many different words in English, but I use that one word in English, like wanting, for many different things in Pali.
Again, that whether a joke is bad joke or is a perception, isn't it, Ajahn?
Sorry?
Whether a joke is bad or not,
Yes.
it's also a perception.
Indeed, yes.
6 and 9.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, yeah.
Sadhu, sadhu.
That's one of the difficulties, and I hope you appreciate that when we translate from Pali into English, we don't have the width of vocabulary in English to really deeply understand what these important words mean. And that is one of the reasons why I try to get closer to the meaning. But you give some important points there, and thank you for giving those points. You can't just say, oh, the Buddha said. The Buddha never spoke English. So you've got to understand what the Buddha meant. And that's a fascinating thing, to find out what the Buddha meant. It's one of the reasons why, and we used to many years ago even have a Pali class for the lay community, many years ago, but not many people attended. You're very busy. So we still do that for the monastics. And I think Ajahn Brahm records those classes, does he not? And teaches it to the bhikkhunis?
I think when Sunyo does it.
Oh, Sunyo does it now, yes. But anyway, we try to make it as open as possible. And when we teach, we try not just to teach how you're supposed to teach, but what is more meaningful. And if you tell what you're supposed to teach, you just say, oh, Vedana, that means feeling. But then you're missing too much of what that word really means. And sometimes one of the best ways of understanding those meanings, it's a difficult ask, but it's actually to read as much of those Pali sutras as you can in Pali. And after a while, you get a feeling for these words. I know that certainly happened for myself, that sometimes you're reading these words, and then the word has a meaning because of its context. And then the context really defines that word, and it gets really powerful. And now you actually understand what that word means. Am I going too far? Oh yes, check.
I just want to know more about these 3 words that you just mentioned, the Dhammaloka, Rupaloka and Arupaloka. But before I ask a question about that, can I just, I've been passing over this, because the 3 words I want to know is more relative to the first noble truth about rebirth is suffering and the 5 components. But before I want to ask the question, relevant question as possible, I want to know what is this is, because is sanya beings.
Yeah.
To me is, sorry, I shouldn't say it to me. I don't think, I think it's a very advanced, because it's sanya beings, it's in the Rupa Loka.
Yes.
Is this being a reborn being?
Yes.
And if it's in a Rupa Loka, and you told us that it's Jhana Loka,
yes.
It is actually, and we know about, you keep teaching us about fading away, and then in the Nikaya you have this Vairaga path. It is, to me, I think it must be something very advanced. It's not like what I mean, okay, I don't mention the word, whatever other people talk or say that is so frightening, you got no mind, you got no, what is Asana they say? You got no brain, your mind, whatever they say. It just makes no sense, the whole thing, because then what's the point of cultivate your mind, don't do evil thing, go and rebirth, go and try to get higher heaven, then go to higher heaven, live a longer life in jhana. It just, I cannot get it. Can you please help me?
Yes. First of all, the asanya sata those beings, it's usually when they go into like a jhana. So it's, in the fourth jhana especially, it's from there you exit this world. You are so still. And even unlike the sanya, kind of vanishes. But not forever. And eventually you come out of those realms. And that is the reason why even those deep, peaceful, blissful realms become suffering. I mean, it's not the sort of suffering which you experience in this world. It's much, much more refined and less the fact that it's not going to last. And when it comes to, why we teach, please do things like keep 5 precepts, be kind, look after your health, look after other people. That's very true to create some happiness in this world. But after a while, that happiness again doesn't last, it's not fulfilling enough. And then when you get into these deep states of bliss, in the meditations, that's where you can see so much further. It's like the more you climb up the mountain, the further you can see.
Can I spend a bit to understand a bit more of this asanya beings?
Yeah.
Because it's a being, we are human, we are being, because you define in your first Noble Truth, whatever types of beings or whatever species of being, I think, what will you put this asanya being, under species or under beings? Or, we haven't really, to me, it's not important whether you put under where, but to me, it's a species of happiness, because in Majjhima Nikaya 53, the types of experience or type of feelings,
Yeah.
this one, asanya, and you told me it's they pass away at 4th jhana. Unless you float, like you see, people in jhana growth can float to jhana. But this is not floating to jhana unless, that is okay, as a human being, okay, let's say this asanya person started as a human being, and he gone into, die as and let's say practice anapanasati. So his body, he get let go of, he learn Ajahn Brahm teaching, he go jhana grove, whether it's a monastery or
Yeah.
so he died. So he died peacefully, he just stays still and calm and good person. So the death process will be from a human being body gone, the anapanasati, Buddha said the human body, the mindfulness of body, the body is discarded. Now come to the mind. Now you are at jhana. He's in jhana. The mind consciousness is in jhana. Then I don't know how he can go to 4th jhana. To me, you need the practice, because it's not easy to get into jhana if you're reborn. So he must be at least, if you read the graduate training, he must be at least a non-returner or stream. Because the stream winner, I don't know whether he is cultivated to have, mature in the 4th jhana, or he's...
Yes.
that there's this class called higher training in Sila, Samadhi and Panya.
Yes.
If you follow that scheme of understanding, this asana person must be at least a non-returner.
I would say he'd be at least a once returner. And that asanya satta being, he would not be able to perceive anything or feel anything. And that would be like that for a long time. It's almost like frozen. But then you'd have to come out of that.
I haven't come up to talk about come up, because I have to understand all these things, because I just only come for this Sunday Sutta class. The come out is even more challenging for me, because I think it will stimulate us, but it's just, I just want to get it right from your teaching at here.
He exits that
I
state.
agree, I agree you say that. I say it was non-returner, you say it's once returner. Of course, I respect you, I will say that, but now my mind is very nervous, but I can agree, he has to be at least a stream, he has to be doing a stream winner while he's a human being. Let's say he's a human being.
Yes.
He has to be a stream winner experience, a fruit of stream winner. He's practicing the path of fruit of a stream winner before he can even go to asanya being.
I believe that's true.
Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's really very frustrating and very difficult to appreciate the sutta if this thing is not right. Of course, people can say that you don't need jhana, you can become enlightened. We are in this class, we are in here, we stick to one format that is you need jhana, you need virtue first, then you need to master your samadhi through insight practice and all these things, then you get enlightened. So it's okay, enough. So asana, we agree that according to Ajahn Brahm, he has once returner. I'll come back to whether it's a return, non-returner, or come-returner.
Okay.
So, but now can I talk about this karma, rupa, and other question?
Yeah,
These
those,
3 words.
that's easier to explain. When a person passes away, if they get reborn in, like even a heavenly realm, even a very high heavenly realm, or into the realm of the animals or other realms, that's called Dhammaloka, K-long-A-M-A. Nothing to do with the law of karma. That's K-A-M-M-A in Pali. This is K-long-A-M-A. And that is, we see that word in many times used by the Buddha, like the middle way to avoid karma, sukhalikanu yoga. That's the attachment to the happiness of those realms of the 5 senses. Or that's the karma, sukhalikanu yoga. And even in our precepts, what's our 3rd precept of the 5 precepts? Kamesu michachara. That's the misconduct in the realm of that sensuality. It's especially used, the idiom of sexuality. But this is the word K-long-A-M-A. And when it comes to the realms of existence, Dhammaloka, like a realm or world, but not like a globe, but just state of existence, where you live according to the demands of the 5 senses. Sometimes not just the 5 senses, sometimes the 4 senses, or in this case, in other words, without the body. And sometimes, but it's basically just those 5 sense world. But when those 5 senses disappear, and you get reborn in the Rupaloka, that is the realm of like the jhanas. Remember, in a jhana, if you ever enter a jhana, you cannot experience the 5 senses within that jhana. Someone may shout at you, you cannot hear it. They can touch you, you cannot feel it. They may put a beautiful fried piece of fish and chips in front of your nose, you can't smell it. You can't taste anything. And just your body can't feel anything. Those 5 senses are stopped, but you're fully aware. What you're aware of is the 6th sense, what they call like the mind consciousness. And that's very, very blissful, being separated from all the others. That's why it's always regarded as a higher state of being than any heaven realm of the 5 senses. And interestingly, it seems that the Dhammaloka, this is Mahabrahma, that being seems to sometimes go into the Rupaloka, sometimes be in Karmaloka, sometimes in between. In the stories, these are just the stories in the suttas, sometimes that this Brahma, there's a big light appears, and then the Brahma comes out of that light. Nimittas, coming out of that nimitta, and then he can actually see and hear what's going on around. People can ask him questions. And then sometimes he just goes back inside. It's almost as if that coming out into the highest Brahma realm, that is like coming into the highest realm of Karmaloka, and then but going into the Brahma, into the Rupaloka afterwards, like in between.
I know, just that I was, sorry, there's so many questions, just that I have to, this is the class, I just can't ask, I will just prioritize in the mind. But I am more interested because I want to go relevant to this is part 2 of this series, so I'm just trying to be
Yes.
cutting back on what my query is.
We do have some of these charts, which some monks have actually drawn up, of the different realms of existence. And I would recommend you see one of those charts.
You mean,
I remember one of the charts we have over in the eating hall at Bodhinyana Monastery.
you mean the 31 plane of existence chart?
Yes.
That's what I meant. I don't understand the chart. I don't even want to deal with the time span of the different lifespan of the different devas there. But the 31 plane, to me, if I base on what I learned from here,
Yeah.
I just book here, you need an overhaul in trying to understand all this virtual training, mindfulness training, wisdom training, because it's just not coherent.
Yeah. After a while you get used to it, and you tend to understand it more and more and more.
No, that's what I'm trying to, because I felt that there's nothing to be fearful about. You see, you keep telling us that, don't worry, the non-self, trying to get nimitta. People are worried about thinking. Don't think, stop thinking, you go blank, you go. But this asana is, even don't talk about before nimitta, it's already non-thinking. The thinking is gone, you are relieved. We don't talk about the dukkha of thinking. It's really a big relief, and the sukha is, if you can really embrace it and got good life and doing a good thing on the ball, doing all the Buddha teaching, I think, sorry, I just get myself distracted. It's just that I felt this fear that people are creating, and then especially come to this asana fear, it's just so funny.
Yeah.
Right from the start, to me, it's so funny. Okay, let me finish it off because it's the root, and then I think I'm getting myself too loud. This asana, you're talking about disappearing. That's why, okay, I buy the story. I mean, I don't buy the story. I always think that once I heard it from you, I straight away, it makes sense. Gatigara and Jotipala.
Yes.
I just jump that our Buddha was a once returner. He didn't discover the Eightfold Path last fortnight, last lesson you taught us, just based on what you say. So he came here as a once returner. Now, as a once returner, he born, and then we heard, you didn't tell us, but I think he came from Tusita heaven. Can I say he came from Tusita? So he's from Buddha of Kassapa.
Yes.
Don't talk about the time frame, the lifespan yet, the time of this Buddha age, and don't even talk about his lifespan as a Jyotipa when he passed away. We just come to Jyotipala died.
Yeah.
Jyotipala become a deva in Tusita heaven. Don't even know what is that, never mind. I also don't even know exactly what is that. Tusita heaven, and then come to us as a human being, reborn as a human being. I'm just going to stick to First Noble Truth, the rebirth.
Yes.
So where is he a once returner? I mean, his body as Jyotipala had to fade away, gone, abandoned completely by him, totally discarded by him. Then his mind go on to become a stream winner. Was it at the time he become a stream winner of a Jyotipala, or is in Tusita heaven, or is and he come as a human here? Is he expressing the fruit of the once returner? Sorry, I don't know whether I'm just going, but I think it's good to get this logic correct.
Yes, fine. Every person should be respected. And what happened with Jyotipala, as a good friend of Gatikara, and then Gatikara convinced him to see Kassapa the Buddha, the previous Buddha to what I call our Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. And then he became a monk, a bhikkhu with Kassapa the Buddha. He would have learnt so much under a Buddha, not with an Ajahn Brahm or an Ajahn Chah, but with a Buddha teaching him. And then I would have expected that he would have been at least a stream winner or once returner, and then staying in the Tusita realm, where it says once returners for the most part get reborn in the Tusita realm, and then from the Tusita realm getting reborn here in this planet Earth 25 centuries ago and a bit more, and then usually even for a stream winner, just a huge a boy, a good boy, tendency to have a good moral code, tendency to understand how to be at peace. That's why the little Buddha, as a boy, 6 or 7 years of age, could sit under the rose apple tree and enter the first jhana. But he had no real teachers at that time who could teach him exactly what that meant. And then afterwards, later on, experimenting with this, experimenting with that, leaving home, and eventually just under the Bodhi tree. It says in those suttas that he could remember, the first thing he remembered of the Te Vijja was his previous lives, one of which would have been under Kassapa. That's where he would remember those teachings and experiences. And then he became our Buddha. Does it make any sense? But if I may, just carry on a little bit, and then if you have some more questions to come afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to just continue just a bit more about these 5 khandhas. Please excuse for taking a long time. This is such an important part of Buddhism, of the Dhamma. The form component of existence. Good. And what is the form component of existence? It is the 4 great elements and the physical qualities derived from the 4 great elements. And what is the 4 great elements? They are the earth, water, fire, and the air element. I must admit, Chang, I had a lot of resistance against that as being a theoretical physicist before I became a monk. And I said, well, that's kind of okay 25 centuries ago, but there's a much better way of understanding form. I would have said, the 3 quarks. Any theoretical physicists here? Fundamental particle physicists? But I do remember in the university when a lecturer was talking about the 3 quarks and how they can combine in 8 different ways. And on the screen he flashed up the 8-fold path in Buddhism. And I almost stood up to clap, but I knew I was going to be in trouble if I did that. But anyway, the perception component of existence. And what is perception? There are these 6 kinds of perception. And Ananda, you're totally correct. Perception of sight, sound, smells, taste, touches, and perception of mental objects. But if you want to know more about perceptions, it's great to go and see a modern psychology and just to see just how many of our perceptions are trained into us. And we just, those which make it socially useful for us, we keep those perceptions. Being a young man, I remember one example of those perceptions was just seeing just all these paintings of, I was a boy before, beautiful women, and they were all plump. This was years and years ago, a couple of centuries ago. And these days, a beautiful woman is always like emaciated. So if any of you women are a bit overweight, there's not anything wrong with you, you're just born at the wrong time. Please excuse me. It's just perception. What is beauty? What is even health? And then the will and the result of willing component of existence. And what are volitions? These are the 6 kinds of volition with regarding sights, will regarding sounds, will regarding smells, and will regarding tastes, will regarding touches, and will regarding mental objects. The consciousnesses component of existence. And what are consciousnesses? There are these 6 kinds of consciousnesses: sight consciousness, hearing consciousness, smell consciousness, taste consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. And the next, that was kind of boring, but I thought it needs to be put in there. But dependent origination of consciousnesses. This is more interesting. In the sense of knowing, mind, if the sense of knowing, mind is intact, but no mind objects come into its range, then there is no manifestation of mind consciousness. Basically, it doesn't exist. If the sense of knowing is intact, mind objects come into its range, but there's no conscious engagement, then there is no manifestation of mind consciousness. But when the sense of knowing is intact, mind objects come into its range, and there is conscious engagement, then the mind consciousness manifests. And so, with the farther 5 senses and the origination each of their own type of consciousness. In other words, because you separated the consciousnesses out into 6 different types, it's not as if there's always one object, one sense of consciousness always there, just waiting. It's not that consciousness or mind consciousness is permanent. When it's not engaged, it doesn't exist. Consciousness is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on sight and visual objects, it is reckoned as sight consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent upon hearing and sounds, it is reckoned as hearing consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent upon smell and odours, it is reckoned as smell consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent upon taste and flavours, it is reckoned as taste consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent upon touch and tangibles, it is reckoned as touch consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent upon the mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. Whatsoever there is of form, that's rupa, this belongs to the form component of existence. Whatsoever there is of experience, vedana, this belongs to the experience component of existence. Whatsoever there is of perception, this belongs to the perception component of existence. Whatsoever there are of will and other mental formations, sankhara, this belongs to the will component of existence. Whatsoever there is of consciousnesses, vijnana, this belongs to the consciousnesses component of existence. Now, this is important, sankhara, because many times people question, why am I focusing on will as the most important part of sankhara? And it's here, in the Samyutta Nikaya, where the best, clearest statement of the Buddha is. Sankhara. What is the sankhara component of existence? The definition of sankhara is the 6 types of will. Cetanakaya. Will involved with the objects of the 6 senses. Will. You keep it simple. And when you make that, there's a little bit more, but that is the essence of the sankhara, is will. It's the results of will, that's the other mental formations, but it's actually what is will itself. And I'll just finish a couple of more paragraphs because these are connected together. Though someone might say, apart from the form, apart from experience, apart from perception, apart from will, I will make known the coming and going of consciousnesses, their passing away and rebirth, the growth, increase and expansion. That is impossible. You can't have consciousness, any consciousnesses, apart from will, perception and experience. Just as two sheaves of reeds, this is the Buddha using a farming simile, just as two sheaves of reeds might stand leaning against each other, so too with the objects of consciousnesses, nama-rupa. As a condition, consciousnesses come to be. With consciousness as a condition, the objects of consciousnesses come to be. If one were to remove one of those sheaves of reeds, the other would fall. So too with the cessation of consciousnesses. The objects of consciousness cease to exist. With the cessation of the objects of consciousness, consciousnesses cease to exist. So even the mind consciousness is not a permanent thing. If there's nothing for the objects of consciousness to be aware of, consciousness ceases. It can come alive again, but it's not always there. Sometimes you say, well, what about night and day, light? It's light now, but in a few hours' time, the sun will go the other side of the earth and we won't be able to have the natural light. Has the sun disappeared? Has it ceased? No, it's just still there, but it's in another place. This is not the same as consciousness, mind consciousness. When it ceases, it ceases. Then it turns on again. When there's something for it to be aware of. Okay. It is now 1:15. Is there any other questions from someone who hasn't asked a question yet before we finish off? Okay, so we'll finish off. The next lesson, the 3 characteristics of existence. So that will be another time, another place. I should turn around. We're going too deep. Arahang Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.